My name's Glyn Pooley, and I'd like to talk about art.
So what we got here first is Ophelia from Shakespeare's play, Hamlet, in which she's singing before she drowns in Denmark, as you do. Goodness me. It's hard to get into the mindset sometimes of some of these Pre Raphaelites, but they are of their time. You know, Shakespeare, of course, massive influence, so many layers to his writing, lends towards the poetic as well as pathos, as well as humor, so many elements to it. But poor old Ophelia, you know, and the model, Lizzie Siddell, she was in this bath of tepid water apparently for months and months and months. In the end, she caught pneumonia and died. Talk about suffering for your art, that's unbelievable, isn't it? Just so he could study the details of the light on the form and all these elements of how would a sinking form would be in water. Dear me, over the top. Anyway, the details are just, again, phenomenal. Studying every little nuance of every plant, going down onto the riverbank. And I suppose this search for perfection in a way of minutiae of details in nature got them a champion of the time, a chap called John Ruskin, who was a writer and quite a good watercolorist himself, actually. And he supported them when they were going through some difficult times with the other establishment of the National Galleries and RA, forget exhibited, etc. Transcendent look again, going off into another world, but nature is playing a big part in that in terms of the beauty. And then this quite stunning picture in terms of amazing light and an element of kind of portentousness and optimism with the double rainbow. But the blind girl, you know, it's about homelessness and vagrancy. So that was on their. This was going on just outside their windows often, but they give it this other kind of twist that it makes it almost really quite palatable in terms of the beauty, the way the piece is being painted and created. Colors wonderful, structure is wonderful, details, you know, wonderful, the light. And they did do a lot of studying out of doors, whether it be sometimes in parks or in gardens or friends' gardens, to get elements of these lights. So, you know, they were totally committed to certain elements of detail. What's interesting, looking at people like Millais as well, so incredibly talented. As he developed and time went on, I think he became more and more kind of saccharine in lots of ways. He went from this commitment to certain ideals, and I suppose all that detail got to him in the end, because later on he painted quite loose pictures. I don't remember anyone remembers there's a quite famous the first ever advertisement was for Pears soap, and it was Millais that painted that, Bubbles. So anyone that's seen that, you can see the kind of difference that he kind of went through, as did a number of these artists as well. As they get older, they kind of got a bit softer, I suppose, or less committed to the sheer hard work of making some of these specific, motivated, quite moralistic ways artworks. So this one, Vale Rest, studying of the female religious order. Again, women doing the hard work, doing the digging up. There's moral elements to it, of course. Everyone comes to be a stone or under the earth. So there's a pathos that appeal to some of the Pre-Raphaelite quality again. That pathos, that spirituality, Pre-Raphaelite and that Victorian spirituality, that love for nature, the connection to nature. This one has got a beautiful light actually in the original. There's many readings that you can put into it, again reflecting on it. So I said, if you like a specific picture, just go look into that one in a little bit more detail. Claudio and Isabella, another Shakespeare influence, Measure for Measure. It's an image that kind of looks at sin. This Claudio has committed a murder, and that's his sister, he's begging her to give up her virginity so that he can go free. So it's a challenge, you know, there's ethical and there's moral issues there. And he's trapped in this jail, of course, done something wrong. She's there to transcend that as the Virgin Mary. There's lots of virgins going on in Pre-Raphaelite work. There's hope through the background. There's, transcendence again. Nature's through the background. There's a church there. Music that elevates, etc. So there's lots of symbols going on constantly. Two figures there engaged in that deep ethical question. This one by Holman Hunt. Now, Holman Hunt really was the most, I suppose you could say, religious member of the Pre-Raphaelites, deep Christian embarkment in his life. So much so he went over to the Holy Land on 3 occasions to try and make different artworks. And he was there as part of the moral conscience of the Victorian era, if you like, as is this one with the Highland Shepherd. Beautifully painted, again, wonderful light, image of a shepherd that should have been looking after the sheep. Pastoral work is off canoodling with the milkmaid, and they're having a jolly good time there, but she's got the lamb on her, of course, spiritual God, a lamb. Jesus is there, but he should have been looking after the stray sheep, which is going off into the corn and all that kind of thing. Beautiful depiction outdoors. There's an idyll to it. Each blade of grass is painted with meticulous attention to detail, as are the apples and the different flowers and sheep and the light and the wonderful trees. Very, very engaging, and it was open to big audiences as well. It was accessible. And some of these pictures, they went on tours and people paid to see them as well. Some went to Australia, hundreds of thousands of people saw them. If you can think, this is pre-film, this is pre-photography for most, really. So they didn't have this amount of imagery that we're completely saturated by. Photography was started in the late 1820s, but it was still black and white and very primitive at this time in the 1850s. So, to see something like this was quite miraculous in all its detail and ability to transfer that information. So that kind of lit them up in terms of the way they were painted. But then he could offer these moralistic kind of views, 19th century ideal. Our English coasts, again, wonderful light on it. Sheep on the edge, possibly being led astray. There's one sheep down here caught in all the brambles. They should have been looked after, but they're not. They're not given the information they should have going to hunt. And they're in jeopardy. They can fall over the cliff if they're not ministered to properly. So that's the idea behind it. But he loves painting the coast. He loves painting later on, particularly the Cornish, Devon coast, these wonderful seas and cliffs. Beautiful study of light in the piece and texture and detail. All laid there. Wonderful light around the edges of the sheep. God, so many depictions of the animal there. He likes sheep as well. He painted them over and over. Great metaphor, obviously, for people from his perspective. The awakening conscience. This is an essay in its own right, so I can't go into it in too much detail. It's wonderfully painted. Claustrophobic interior, Victorian interior. Loads and loads of details there. Looks like a man and a wife having a chat. It's not about that. It's about a fallen woman or a kept woman, and they're having a liaison there. She hasn't got a ring on her married finger, but ring on every other. And there's loads and loads of symbols that refer back to that. Cat playing with the bird, etc., toying with them. The clock is within a glass case, so she's contained. She's awakening from that, struggle of being contained and kept, and that appeal to Hunt and Victorian moral values in lots of ways. But what an amazing study of a Victorian interior. Heavily decorated piano, wonderful tapestries again, different books and music, all included in there. Poems by Tennyson there. That dropped glove again. Fallen morals, all these things are included in the piece. But just a beautiful piece. I remember going up to the tape Britain as it is now. It used to be just a Tate in the 80s. And they got a wonderful Pre-Raphaelite room in there. So if you're interested in Pre-Raphaelites, go and have a look at them in there. I remember going and seeing them as a teenager, and they do take your breath away in terms of the quality of the painting. So it's well worth a visit when you can. And they also got a good selection in Birmingham Museum as well, and in Manchester there's some good ones in there. And one or two in Liverpool thinking about it, but it's the industrial places. There was industrial money at that particular time, and it's almost like they're appeasing their consciousness to the higher moral ground at times. Very famous picture here, the light of the world, Christ knocking on the door, trying to attract souls. The door, of course, has no handle on it, so it can't be opened from the outside. So the soul has to find out their connection for themselves. But Hunt spent, again, months outside in a little hut, dusk to dawn, painting this picture through the night often as well, to capture these details of the light. This has been reproduced so many times, hasn't it? But it's kind of got a fantastic quality to it. Pictorially, it is beautiful. The way the light is being portrayed from the lantern, the study of the details of the different vegetation there, the look on the face. But it's really kind of idealized in lots of ways. And then this is a Scapegoat. Again, this is one of his trips over to the Holy Land. Symbolic, again, the Scapegoat, Old Testament literature, book of Leviticus, I think it is. On the Day of Atonement, the goat would have its horns wrapped in a red cloth, which represented the sins of the community, and then sent out and moved away from the community, sent to die, really, in lots of ways. And the actual goat that he was painting while he was out there did die. So he was so true to nature. He was taking so long, the poor thing collapsed. And there was a war going on at the time, which didn't help. He had a rifle across his knees, apparently. So we got another goat, and carried on with that. But the poor goat became a scapegoat, literally. Love it. But it's amazing. It's the Dead Sea, Palestine. Wonderful depiction of the landscape. Wonderful light again. I suppose, going all the way over there at that particular time, risky business to make an artwork shows an incredible dedication to detail. I remember, wonderful image, isn't it, really? So much, so memorable in so many ways. Once you've seen that goat's head with that on, it appears over and over in lots of other artworks in art history, as we've already seen in some of the presentations. And this is a later one by him of the Devon Cornish coast, Asparagus Island. Just thank goodness we're away from the morals in lots of ways, and that quite heavy preaching at times, and went into a study of the island, which was quite secluded, that he went for a little walk with Alfred Tennyson. So this is a lake watercolour, amazing technique, as you can see, just building up from that white ground, layers and layers of paint, the translucence, to get this amazing golden glow. And then another strong image by Henry Wallis, Death of Chatterton. Chatterton, poet, unfortunately, committed suicide early in his 20s. Tortured soul. Some of the Pre Raphaelites in their early works, and lots of artists relate to this. All his poems ripped up and stuck in a box in Gray's Inn, and the artist went there to Gray's Inn in London to actually make it. It's just a very romantic image in some respects, but it's iconic. It is so strong as well once you kind of see it. There's a combination of elevation and, as I said in the early pictures, a certain kind of transcendence. The artist, suffering, struggling artist, puts everything into their work, and it can end up in tatters in lots of ways. But there's elements of hope if you keep going. The windows open, St. Paul's is in the background, there's a lightness there, there's a plant of life on the Windsor Edge, move beyond the struggles in lots of ways as well. And then we've got Ford Madox Brown, this fantastic picture, The Last of England. These pictures, again, they're just full of symbols. Paired in 1855 on a ship, that's why it's like a porthole shape there. These are friends of Madox Brown, the sculptor Thomas Woolner and his wife. Escaping Britain, there was mass migration in the mid-1850s. Over 350,000 people left England. And it just goes to show the state of affairs that it was like there. So nothing's new, is it? We go through these difficult times now, and who knows, we might have mass migration again. This was happening. These people, these were educated people, and they were struggling for different reasons. They weren't emigrating purely just to feed their family. They had ethical, moral reasons for leaving the country. But all those things are kind of written out in the picture. There's the cliffs of Dover in the background. There's a kind of fight going on, and the ruffians going on there. The two little figures, a little baby's hand hidden in her dress. Wonderful detail, fantastic image. I think this is in Manchester. Wonderful piece to see again. The determination in the face. Once you kind of look at that, challenging us to the situation. How did it get to this? What's happened in this country so I've got to go all the way to Australia, all this kind of thing. And then just the wonderful way it's been painted, real models in a real position, going through real issues and studies, struggles in their life being portrayed in a very straightforward, direct, but amazing way. And this one, the famous one, Work by Claude Madox Brown, a total analogy of what was going on in the Victorian system, just moved from rural to urban, and the consequences of that, and all aspects of Victorian society portrayed in this picture. In Hampstead Heath, and they're digging up the old, which was semi-rural, and turning it into this urban environment, with all the problems that breeds. Got the brain workers on the right hand side, as they're so called. This was influenced by Thomas Carlyle. He wrote The State of Britain at that particular time and its problems and what was happening. So you've got some obviously rich people on the horses in the background, but then you've got ordinary people and almost in rags in the foreground. All stratas of society are laid within the picture. And if you've got a week or two and you want to study all the elements of it, feel free, have a go, because there is so much symbolism in it. It just moves from one place to another. Pod carrier, there's so much. So if you like it, as I said, go and have a look at it. Whole list of the symbolism in it. It's a wonderful picture. It's in Manchester. We've seen it in Manchester, and it's worth one to stand in front because it's got universal messages in it about when we move from one system to another. Obviously, there's certain winners, and there's often quite a lot of losers, particularly in the transition phase of that. And Madox Brown was trying to portray that. On the other hand, we've got William Waterhouse, quite famous image, the Lady of Shalott, again from a Tennyson play. So high romanticism is in these pieces that he kind of portrays. You can see the Pre Raphaelite elements of the woman lost on a boat this time, being taken away somewhere to another world in isolation, harking back to their love of the medieval period and to Arthurian legends again and all that kind of thing. Wonderful attention to detail. There's such a wonderful romanticism to this as well. I suppose it's been reproduced so many times. But there she is, the pure virgin, all dressed in white. Beata Beatrice, elevated state, moving beyond the here and now. Wonderful study of the background and landscape as she is in the black boat taken to another world. And then this beautiful, simple picture, relatively in terms of the symbolism. My sweet Rose, there is Rose taking on Rose. There's a sensuousness in this which challenged the morals of Victorian society, because there's what can we say, overtones of different kinds of sexuality, lesbianism, etc. in this was being played out. But the Pre-Raphaelite model is there with the hair all tied up this time, not all flowing and being let loose, held, bound. This is love that's not allowed to be, if you like. The rose takes on the rose, but beautifully portrayed. Lots of symbolism. You can see how this is a forerunner to people like Gustav Klimt. Well, actually, this is at the same time as Gustav Klimt, but some of the work that the Pre-Raphaelites were doing and Waterhouse earlier Clint was, there was overlaps in the symbolism and the time span as well. Even the coloration is there. And then this one from Waterhouse again, the Lady of Shalott, half sick in the shadows. This is again from the Tennyson poem. A few words from Tennyson poem give an idea of the kind of romanticism they were contending with. Tennyson says, "But in her web she still delights to weave the mirror's magic sights. For often through the silent nights a funeral, with plumes and lights and music, came from Camelot. Or when the moon was overhead, came two young lovers lately wed. I am half sick of shadows," said the Lady of Shalott. There's elements of yearning and containment, and elements there whereby she was only allowed to look at her lover through a mirror on the wall. You can see the mirror's got this beautiful heart shape to it, and she's getting up from her heavy contained duties of in a contained space doing her embroidery. There's lots of morals, I suppose. There were so many moral boundaries in Victorian society that they had to find some kinds of metaphors to get beyond it in those upper class, those echelons. Anyone that's know anything about Queen Victoria, and the kind of woman she was, that says it all, really, doesn't it? Controlling people and moral, narrow ways of thinking from our perspective these days. But that was there, and that was there, and it was there to keep the stratas in society and keep everyone in their place. But then there was obviously lots of victims to that. On the other side, they also achieved a lot as well, in certain developments. Fine line to walk between advancement in society in terms of industrialization, but then the psychological impact of containing people in certain kind of barriers and mindsets, which is what the Pre Raphaelites do kind of try and show at their best, the dichotomy between the two, and finding ways to get through that.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell notification.